Jay and Peter Flores, well, I came in contact with them in 2004. This is like at the peak point of the performances of Get Rich or Die Trying. Fucking them ended up in Chicago. So one of the dudes in his entourage decided they want to go out and party, bro. So he goes to Cabrini Green Projects. He knocks on the door and shows them the G-Unit spinner piece, like, yo, what's up, G-Unit, let me in. They let him in, they let him out, no peace.
Look what happened. Now your career on the line, cause Ja Rule finna get your thing. You dumb ass.
Yo, you know who got the chain back? Them El Chapo twins. Them Spanish. You know how that go? Nobody gets no work in Chicago. Nobody's getting no work in Chicago until the chain come back.
50 Cent is known for many things: his music, his business ventures, and his larger-than-life persona. But one thing that often gets overlooked is just how deep his connections run. Believe it or not, 50 Cent has ties to some serious players, including the Cartel.
Well, I came in contact with them in 2004. This is like at the peak point of the performances of Get Rich or Die Trying.
If you're familiar with the Cartel world, then the name Flores twins might ring a bell. These guys were once El Chapo's right-hand men, handling massive drug operations. But they're also infamous for turning on El Chapo, snitching on him to reduce their own prison sentences, earning them the title of the biggest snitches of all time. What's wild is that back when the Flores twins were still in the game and working with El Chapo, they built a relationship with 50 Cent. In fact, they reportedly helped him recover Young Buck's chain when it was stolen.
Look what happened. Now your career on the line, cause Ja Rule finna get your thing. You dumb ass.
Yo, you know who got the chain back? Them El Chapo twins. Them Spanish. You know how that go? Nobody gets no work in Chicago. Nobody's getting no work in Chicago until the chain come back.
So in a roundabout way, you could say that El Chapo indirectly helped 50 Cent because the Flores twins were his guys, and there's no way they would have made moves like that without him knowing. Even crazier, the bond between 50 Cent and the Flores twins didn't end there. After the twins snitched on El Chapo and served their time, they were released from prison, and 50 Cent actually helped them launch a podcast.
Really, I'm a full-time producer. You know, so I got the, what's they coming, actually tomorrow. The Flores Twins podcast is Surviving El Chapo.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack here, so let's break it all down. In 2004, G-Unit was dominating the rap game. 50 Cent had skyrocketed to superstardom after dropping his classic debut album, Get Rich or Die Tryin'. The crew kept the momentum going with their group album, Beg for Mercy. And then Lloyd Banks and Young Buck both released their own successful solo projects, The Hunger for More and Straight Outta Cashville. G-Unit's buzz was off the charts, and they were getting booked for shows all over the country. Amid all the excitement, Young Buck and Lloyd Banks hit the road to promote their new albums, which brought them to Chicago. Now, if you know anything about 50 Cent, he's always been a calculated and cautious leader, especially when it comes to protecting the G-Unit brand and their reputation. Before they touched down in Chicago, 50 gave strict instructions: handle your business, then go straight back to the hotel. No partying, no hanging out in the streets. He had a feeling something could go wrong, and he wasn't about to let anything jeopardize their image or safety.
We're just supposed to be doing radio promo in that city. They actually had said we wasn't supposed to go out.
Banks and Buck took 50's words to heart. After doing a radio interview and performing at a concert later that night, they went straight back to their hotel rooms, ready to chill and call it a night. But not everyone in their crew was on the same page. Enter D-Tay, Young Buck's longtime friend and hype man. Buck and D-Tay went way back to their days growing up in Nashville, where they'd been in the streets together. Their bond was deep. D-Tay had even saved Buck's life at one point. Naturally, when Buck started touring with G-Unit, he brought D-Tay along as part of his entourage. D-Tay often performed with Buck on stage, hyping up the crowd while rocking G-Unit's iconic spinner chain. This wasn't just any piece of jewelry, it was a status symbol. The chain, designed by Lloyd Banks, had a spinning G-Unit logo in the center and was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. 50 Cent made it famous by wearing it in music videos and photo shoots, but Buck was the one who really put it on the map. The spinner chain represented everything G-Unit stood for: success, toughness, and dominance in the rap game. In hip-hop, getting your chain snatched isn't just about losing a piece of jewelry, it's about losing respect. It can ruin your street cred and make fans question whether your image is authentic. At the time, G-Unit was viewed as one of the hardest crews in the industry, so a stolen chain would have been a major blow. That's why 50 warned everyone to stay low-key and avoid unnecessary risks. But of course, 50 couldn't control every move made by the people around him, and D-Tay ended up ignoring the warning that night in Chicago. The chain was supposed to be worn only during performances. It wasn't something to be flaunted around casually. But D-Tay wasn't trying to hear that. He was feeling himself, repping G-Unit, and probably not thinking about the consequences. D-Tay had a friend in Chicago who was hyped to show him around the city. And despite all of 50 Cent's warnings, D-Tay couldn't resist the temptation. Young Buck, meanwhile, had already settled back at the hotel with a woman and wasn't trying to go anywhere. But this was D-Tay's first time in Chicago, and he wanted to see what the city had to offer, especially the nightlife.
They actually had said we wasn't supposed to go out.
The problem was that D-Tay didn't want to spend money to get into a club. So instead of paying for his night out, he decided to flex his G-Unit affiliation for free entry. That's when he snuck into Buck's hotel room and grabbed the infamous G-Unit spinner chain. The plan was simple: rock the chain, show people he was with G-Unit, and walk right into any spot like a VIP. What could go wrong, right? Well, plenty. D-Tay and his boys didn't head to just any club. They decided to hit a spot right outside Cabrini Green, one of the most notorious neighborhoods in Chicago.
We ended up going out, riding around looking for somewhere to go. I'm not knowing where we at. So we ended up, from what I'm hearing, ended up pulling somewhere around Cabrini Greens.
For those unfamiliar, Cabrini Green wasn't just a rough area. It was one of the most dangerous hoods in the country back then. The projects were run by the Gangster Disciples, a gang known for their heavy presence and reputation for violence. Stories about snipers on rooftops guarding their territory weren't just urban legends, they were real. But D-Tay, being new to Chicago, probably had no idea what kind of place he was stepping into. He figured rocking the G-Unit chain would shield him from any issues. What he didn't realize was that while G-Unit might command respect on the East Coast, their influence didn't stretch as far in Chicago. And this wasn't just any neighborhood. This was Cabrini Green. By the time D-Tay and his crew got to the Dragon Room, a club in the area, it was already late. The Dragon Room was one of the only spots still open after midnight, and it was notorious for attracting a rowdy crowd. When D-Tay pulled up, the bouncers spotted the chain and let him and his homies in without a cover charge.
We pulled up. I was out the window in the club. One of the security guards at the club was in the door, and he knew we was in the city, so he was like, "Oh, okay, G-Unit, like, y'all good, come on, y'all good."
Outside the club, things seemed chill at first. D-Tay and his boys started talking to a group of women hanging around near the entrance. One of the women seemed interested in D-Tay, but he noticed something odd. She kept glancing over his shoulder, like she was watching something behind him. Curious, D-Tay turned around and saw 3 or 4 guys crossing the street and heading toward them. At first, it didn't seem like anything. The guys walked past D-Tay and his crew and went straight into a corner. Relieved, D-Tay shrugged it off and went back to chatting with the woman.
We watch them. They walk on through us, headed towards the club, though. Okay? So we didn't think too much about it. We watched them, and they went on and walked. Then they walked on around the corner. They didn't go in the club.
But just a few minutes later, one of those same guys reappeared. This time, things escalated quickly. The man pulled out a gun and fired a shot at D-Tay's foot, the loud crack of the gunshot shattering the night. Before D-Tay could fully register what was happening, he heard someone yell from behind, "Gimme that," and felt hands grab at the chain around his neck.
Came back around, ran up behind me, grabbed the chain from the back, shot at the ground. Now he's got his hand on my piece back here and shooting at the ground saying, "Give me that."
In a split second, D-Tay's instincts kicked in. He grabbed onto the chain, trying to stop the guy from snatching it, but it was chaos. His homie pulled out a gun and started firing back, and suddenly both sides were letting off shots. D-Tay's adrenaline was pumping as he clutched the chain, but when he looked up, he saw the size of the gun the robber was holding. It was massive, and in that moment, he realized it wasn't worth dying over a piece of jewelry, even one as iconic as the G-Unit spinner chain.
He's saying, "Give me that." He done shot one time. When he shot, my Manny shot. Okay, so it was like a boom. Then Manny shot, boom. Then he shot again, boom. I seen the barrel. And when I seen the barrel, that was about that long, Paul. So I know what I do. Man, you can have this. You feel what I'm saying? I flicked the necklace on off.
Reluctantly, he let go. D-Tay unclasped the chain from his neck and handed it over to the robbers, who quickly disappeared into the night. Then D-Tay sneaked back into the hotel, trying to keep things low-key. But when daylight hit, there was no avoiding the situation. He had to come clean to young Buck about what went down. When D-Tay finally told Buck that the iconic G-Unit spinner chain had been snatched, Buck was furious. 50 Cent had explicitly warned everyone to avoid going out and getting into any trouble. And on top of that, D-Tay wasn't even supposed to have the chain in the first place.
I'm like, the G-Unit spinner. He like, the G-Unit spinner? Tay, no, Tay. You wasn't even supposed to have the chain. How you get the chain, Tay?
Buck knew there was no way around it. They had to call 50 and let him know what happened. When Buck got 50 on the phone, he put D-Tay on the line to explain himself. Surprisingly, 50's reaction wasn't what they expected, at least at first. He asked D-Tay if he was okay and made it clear that his safety was the most important thing.
He give me the phone, and Fifth's like, are you all right? And I'm like, yeah. You know, he said, well, that's really all that matters, that you all right, you know. But y'all wasn't supposed to be out either, Tay, you know.
The reason for 50's measured response was simple. He suspected his phone might be tapped. He didn't want to say anything incriminating or over the top that could come back to bite him later. But behind the scenes, 50 was livid. Once the call ended, 50 made a decision. D-Tay was officially off the tour. He was sent home immediately and was told not to contact Buck or anyone else in G-Unit for the foreseeable future.
I give Buck back the phone, and all I knew was they sent Tay home immediately.
Meanwhile, Buck stayed behind in Chicago to figure out who had the chain and how to get it back. But tracking down the chain wasn't easy. Buck spent days asking around, pulling strings, and trying to make sense of what had happened. Unfortunately, his efforts didn't lead to immediate results. With the rest of the tour moving forward, Buck couldn't afford to stay in Chicago any longer. He missed the next show in Milwaukee, but eventually had to leave and catch up with the crew in Atlanta. Just when things seemed to be settling, the situation got even worse. The goons who had snatched the chain started doing interviews, bragging about how they got it.
Look what happened. Now your career on the line. Ja Rule finna get your chain. You dumb.
They claimed they were mad about being denied entry to the club and saw D-Tay standing outside, distracted and wearing a flashy piece of jewelry. To them, it was an easy opportunity, and they decided to make their move. The robbers weren't just content with telling their story, they wanted to humiliate G-Unit further. They offered to sell the chain back for $100,000 and even reached out to people connected to the game. The plan was to broker a deal, but the game's team reportedly thought the asking price was too high, and the negotiations fell apart. When the robbers couldn't sell the chain, they decided to use it for clout instead. They started rocking the spinner chain in music videos and sharing photos to prove they had it.
If you don't get up with us before y'all get here and don't holler at us, this how going down, man. This what happened. Y'all already know how this go, man.
Now that the story was out, 50 Cent had no choice but to step in and resolve the situation. According to D-Tay, the key to getting the chain back was a man known as The Godfather. The Godfather was one of the most respected figures in Chicago's underworld. Nothing significant happened in the city's streets without his knowledge or approval. If anyone could mediate a situation like this and make things right, it was him. The day after the chain snatching incident, young Buck wasn't about to let things slide. He hit the streets of Chicago, going from radio station to radio station, asking around about who he needed to talk to in order to get the G-Unit spinner chain back. Everyone gave him the same answer: The Godfather. Buck learned that The Godfather, a highly respected figure in Chicago's underworld, was hosting a summer jam concert in the city at the time. Without wasting any time, Buck pulled up to the event and asked for his help. The Godfather agreed to assist and said he'd make some calls to try and locate the chain. But that wasn't all. He introduced Buck to a rapper named JoJo Capone. JoJo was a seasoned OG from Chicago with deep ties to the Gangster Disciples and extensive connections in the rap industry. He'd worked with heavyweights like The Game and Dipset, so his network was solid. At the time, The Game was already signed to G-Unit, which made JoJo willing to step in and help. Buck had seen JoJo hanging out with The Game on a Smack DVD, so he assumed getting the chain back would be a straightforward process. But things quickly got complicated. At first, JoJo told Buck it would cost $20,000 to get the chain back. While JoJo tried to negotiate a deal, Buck called The Game to update him on what was happening. He mentioned he was with JoJo Capone and trying to sort things out. Strangely, right after Buck got off the phone, JoJo came back and told him the price had jumped to $100,000. Buck immediately felt like something shady was going on. To him, it seemed like JoJo had hiked the price after hearing about the situation with the game, feeling like he was being played. Buck decided the chain wasn't worth $100,000 and left Chicago to rejoin the G-Unit tour in Atlanta. Later, JoJo Capone spoke out about the incident. He insisted he had nothing to do with the robbery or the sudden price hike. According to him, he was just trying to help G-Unit because of his friendship with the game. But JoJo admitted he started to sense that Buck didn't fully trust him. Buck might have thought JoJo was somehow involved in the robbery or was trying to profit from the situation.
I get the chain back. But then, of course, you're going to hear the whispers like as if we the ones took it, and now we trying to sell it back to them. Me trying to do those good deeds, I had swore to myself like I would never do it. I'd never do that ever again. I don't care what happened to nobody. Don't call me no more. Because I genuinely was trying to help.
After Buck left Chicago, JoJo decided to back off entirely. He didn't want to be dragged into any unnecessary drama. However, the story didn't end there. A few years later, the game referenced the chain-snatching incident in his infamous diss track, 300 Bars and Runnin'. In the song, he rapped, "And you got robbed for your spinning G-Unit chain in Chicago. I called my guy JoJo to get it back. He had the ish in his hands, and you ain't had the 10 stacks. Picture that. I thought we was G-Unit." Even after leaving Chicago, Buck was still determined to recover the chain. While in Atlanta, he started spreading the word that he needed help. During that time, Buck linked up with Spider Lock, a rapper from Los Angeles who had ties to Suge Knight. Spider Lock had recently parted ways with Death Row Records and was looking for a new opportunity to prove himself. When he met Buck, he saw a chance to impress him and offered to help get the chain back. Spider Lock listened as Buck vented about the situation in Chicago. Buck mentioned seeing a lot of people wearing Made Men chains while he was there, which gave Spider Lock an idea. Spider had connections to another rapper named J.O. Felony, who was close to both the game and JoJo Capone. Spider reached out to J.O. and asked if he could assist. J.O. put Spider on a call with the game to see if they could work something out. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. The game didn't realize the call was on speakerphone, and he had no idea that Buck and Tony Yayo were also listening in. When Spider Lock asked the game about the chain, the game shocked everyone by saying FG Unit and F the chain. Everyone in the room was stunned. At that time, the game was still officially part of G-Unit, so his response caught Buck and Yayo completely off guard. It was unclear why the game was so dismissive. Maybe he was upset about how things went down with JoJo Capone. Or maybe tensions with 50 Cent were already brewing behind the scenes. Whatever the reason, his statement made it clear he had no intention of helping recover the chain. Buck and Yayo heard the game's words loud and clear, and it was allegedly that moment that sparked the very beginning of the infamous beef between the game and G-Unit. But G-Unit wasn't about to let the chain-snatching incident go unresolved. Even after everything that went down in Chicago, young Buck got back on the phone with the Godfather, hoping to smooth things over. At first, the Godfather was annoyed that Buck had left the city without a heads up, and he wasn't too eager to help. But then Spider Lock stepped in, sensing this was his moment to prove his loyalty and value. Spider Lock jumped on the phone and casually mentioned he was from Los Angeles. That caught the Godfather's attention. Wanting to flex his own connections, the Godfather brought up his friendship with Suge Knight. What he didn't realize was that this was exactly what Spider Lock wanted to hear. Spider, though no longer affiliated with Death Row, was still on good terms with Suge. Without skipping a beat, Spider told the Godfather to go ahead and ask Suge about him.
Even though I'm on the ops team now, I took my chance telling him with extras on it, well, if you tap in with Suge Knight, ask him about Baby Spider from 97th Street.
A few hours later, the Godfather called back. His tone had changed completely. He told Spider to pass a message along to Buck. "I'm gonna get your chain back and you can thank Spider Lock for it."
He called Young Buck and told Young Buck that, don't worry about it, you're gonna get that chain back and you can thank that Spider.
This move solidified Spider Lock's standing with Buck, and the two began building a stronger bond. A week later, Buck introduced Spider to 50 Cent in Los Angeles. Impressed with Spider's street smarts and initiative, 50 decided to bring him into the G-Unit family. Within weeks, Spider Lock officially signed a deal with G-Unit. But Spiderlock wasn't the only one working behind the scenes to recover the chain. According to 50 Cent, there was another major player involved, the Flores twins. These weren't just any random figures from the streets. They were two of the biggest drug traffickers in Chicago, directly tied to El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel. These guys weren't just moving weight, they were moving mountains, reportedly dealing up to 300 kilos of coke a week. The Flores twins heard about the stolen chain when one of the robbers tried to sell it to them. But instead of buying it, they saw an opportunity to get in good with 50 Cent. The twins made a bold move. They ordered a complete freeze on all drug shipments into Chicago until the chain was returned.
Yo, you know who got the chain back? Them El Chapo twins. Them Spanish. You know how that go? Nobody gets no work in Chicago. Nobody's getting no work in Chicago until the chain come back.
The freeze meant street-level dealers couldn't get their supply, and the pressure started building quickly. The Godfather, being one of the city's major drug kingpins, felt the squeeze immediately. He knew the freeze was bad for business and decided to act fast. He put his own pressure on the goons who had taken the chain, ordering them to hand it over to the Flores twins. In the end, the chain was returned, and the incident helped establish a surprising connection between 50 Cent and the Flores twins. For the twins, helping G-Unit turned out to be a smart play. In 2008, they were caught by the feds and flipped, becoming key informants who helped bring down El Chapo himself. Their cooperation led to El Chapo's eventual capture, and while the twins were still sentenced to 14 years in prison, their assistance earned them a reduced sentence. They were released in 2020, and years later, 50 Cent decided to repay the favor. He helped the twins produce a podcast called Surviving El Chapo, which detailed their lives, their rise in the drug game, and their role in bringing down one of the world's most infamous drug lords. But here's the craziest twist of the whole story. The G-Unit spinner chain that caused all this drama, it wasn't even real. Back when 50 had the original spinner chain made, it cost around $300,000. The chain was insured, and every time it left his possession, the insurance fees would shoot up. To avoid the hassle and extra costs, 50 had a dummy chain made, a replica that looked exactly like the original but was worth significantly less. The real chain stayed locked away in a safe, while the dummy chain was handed off to Young Buck. So, the night D-Tay got robbed, the goons actually walked away with the fake chain. Despite it being a replica, the optics of Chicago robbers flaunting a G-Unit chain in interviews made it a major issue. Losing it, real or fake, wasn't an option. It's wild to think about how much effort went into recovering a fake chain. It took El Chapo's cartel and one of Chicago's most respected gangsters to bring it back.